I'm John Batchelor. Gordon Chang, my colleague and co-host, is traveling. He's on the Pacific Rim, California. We are going to the other side of the Pacific Rim. A typhoon, Haiyan, Category 5, sweeps into Leyte and Cebu. These are two large islands in the Philippine island chain. Leyte is of significance to American history because Leyte Gulf and Leyte itself were the scene of the operation, the liberation of the Philippines in 1944. That's where MacArthur landed. You've all seen that picture of MacArthur coming through the surf with his aides around him. There are actually gunshots around him at the time. There were snipers in the jungle. That's Leyte. Leyte got hit by Typhoon Haiyan, and almost 2 weeks later now, the U.S. Navy has dispatched George Washington. George Washington took off its F-18 wing and left him in Japan, I believe, and put on V-22 Osprey's wing, filled up the deck, and immediately traveled to the Philippines to relieve 600,000 to 1 million people. They're homeless, they're without water, they're without electricity, they're desperate. There's no food. Right now, they're just dealing with survival. Then they'll get to rebuilding. This is a success of the U.S. Navy. Right now, there are 2 amphibious carriers headed in with 900 Marines from Okinawa. Ashdown and Germantown are headed in. Washington's rotating out. Nimitz will not be used. They're going to send the Marines in. That's what the U.S. is doing. A lot. For a country where we've had an intimate relationship, we've gone through troubles and good times and bad times and war, and we've survived for more than 100 years. What about China? Why? That's the great big power in Asia. What is it doing for the people of the Philippines? Gordon, the last time we checked, the Chinese had raised their bid to be charitable to, I think, a little more than $1 million. Why so cautious, Gordon? How does that suit the Chinese bosses in Beijing? Good evening again.
Good evening, John. I think part of it is because they wanted to show the Philippines the back of their hand. So their first offer of aid was $100,000 US. And then they upped it to about 1.64 million. Still not very much for the emerging superpower in the region. The other thing is that because they've created so much of a nationalist fervor in China about the Philippines, it's very hard for the leadership to turn around and then start offering them aid. And there has been a lot of chatter on China's very nationalist internet saying that the Beijing shouldn't be offering any money at all. So you have Chinese leaders right now are thinking about what to do. They're a little bit intimidated by what the Chinese people think. But what the Chinese people think really has been the product of this nationalist education and indoctrination.
I want to tie all this together with events of these last years. South China Sea, Spratly Island, Scarborough Shoal. That aggression is aimed at the Philippines. That's what you mean about poor relations between Manila and Beijing. The Chinese PLA Navy is out there, like I'm told the metaphor is a man with a big belly, pushing it closer and closer to the Philippine mainland or the Philippine Islands. The Filipinos are aware of this, and we're aiding them. How does this, what's the formula out there, Gordon? What is it that the Chinese don't understand about how neighborhoods work?
Well, the one thing that is very important is a lot of people say that the U.S. aid to the Philippines is really to try to one-up China. And I think that that narrative is wrong. Because if you go back to the 2004 tsunami, the United States spent months and months in the region delivering aid. And this was during a time when the Bush administration couldn't care less about Asia. So this is what the United States does. When there's a humanitarian disaster someplace in the world, and if we have the capability to provide aid and assistance, that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And, you know, it's not so much that we're generous, because, yeah, we are, but it's because we're a democracy. And this is what democracies do. We get in touch with our humanitarian instincts, and we provide help to people who need it.
I mentioned the United Kingdom sent Illustrious, their carrier. There are other ships flowing into the region. There's a lot of aircraft. Israel sent a lot of doctors and a field hospital. China, nothing. So let's turn to the Chinese. Right now, China is in bad odor throughout Asia. It's not just the Philippines. It's Vietnam. We could name all the states. Do they care, Gordon? Is that a concern for the future, for the leadership? This the bad behavior, aggression, what you'd have to say at this point was they're cheapskates. They're just trying to get by, saving their money, trying to be generous to the Philippines. Is that the future for Asia?
I think the future is that China, that, let's say, were the hegemon. I don't think it's going to happen. But if they were, you would have more of this belligerent bad behavior, which is just awful. I mean, this is the way the Chinese operate. They believe that they're the center of the world and that everyone has to accommodate them, and that if the Chinese give aid, it's because they're so nice. But apparently, what we're seeing is the side of China that nobody likes. And it's, I think, also not so much Chinese. I think it has a lot to do with their authoritarianism. This is the way authoritarian governments operate.
I mentioned this isn't just the South China Sea where they're being aggressive. There's a note here, Gordon, a Tu-154MD Chinese aircraft spotted over the Senkaku Islands for the first time last Friday. Sunday. It was Sunday, 17th day. Monday, just 48 hours ago. So they're continuing the aggression in the East China Sea, also against Japan. There's no backing off. We mentioned this because it is a puzzle what the U.S. is going to do about it. We send in aid, we send in aircraft carriers and amphibious carriers. Everybody in the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps know that China is being aggressive, but we don't respond diplomatically, Gordon.
Yes, and we definitely should, because the Chinese are acting as classical aggressors here. They were able to seize Scarborough Shoal last year because we didn't do anything. And we thought that this would avoid a confrontation, but it hasn't, because the Chinese now want Second Thomas Shoal from the Philippines and some other barren outcroppings. And once they seized Scarborough, they then started to put up more pressure on the Senkakus that the Japan holds in the East China Sea.
Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. Good for the U.S. Navy, good for the U.S. Marine Corps. China, nowhere. I'm John Batchelor.